Does the system feel like it's failing you? Maybe it is. Find out more about it in this episode.
Do you want to know why you feel like things have changed? Listen in.
You're a teacher or an educator and you want people to respect what you do. Here's why they might not.
It's time to remember what education is truly about.
Welcome to I Am Education, the place where we unpack the education system, the behaviours and development of children, and how it impacts you, the educators, teachers, and leaders in this space. I'm Rebecca.
And I'm Jason, and we are your hosts on this journey to being the best educator and teacher you can be. A place for you to be seen, to be heard, to be challenged.
And where you can learn how to stop burnout and how to change your current reality and the lives of the children in your classroom.
In each episode, we will dive deeper into the tools, frameworks, and practices that help you show up for yourself and for children you work with each and every day.
So let's go. It's time to learn why you matter. Welcome to today's episode. So we are going to speak about the pros and cons of early childhood here in Australia. So Jace,
hello.
Tell us about your journey in early childhood, when it started, how long you've been doing it for, before we get into the details of our own beliefs, opinions, thoughts, experiences within the sector.
Great. Okay, so I started off early childhood at the age of 18. Mm-hmm. I fell into the role. I was
working, literally?
Pretty much. I was working at McDonald's at the time, mm-hmm. and I just needed some extra cash. A friend of mine was doing before and after school care. Asked if I wanted to get a job. Sure, why not? I was studying my high school teaching, a double degree high school teaching, maths and PE, and then human movements and biomechanics. So I was studying that and decided to do after school care. Got put in charge of the preps very quickly, mm-hmm. fell in love with working with them. Yep. So moved from high school teaching to primary. Then as part of that, I had to do work in a early learning in a kindy and went, oh, these guys are really cool. And so I moved down to lower primary. And then I just kept on going until I ended up down in early childhood. Mm-hmm. So this happened over probably less than 6 months span. It was a very quick realization. It felt right, mm-hmm. working in early childhood. And then I got a job working full-time at early childhood, full-time work, full-time study, and have been doing that ever since.
Great. So tell me about why you loved the early years over the other demographics.
They seem to have a lot more freedom, mm-hmm. and there was just a lot more joy, a lot more fun, a lot more. I felt as an educator that I could be myself more. This was 18, 19, so trying to figure out who you are to begin with is tricky.
So hold on, how long ago was that? Because not everyone knows how old you are.
I'm turning 36 this year.
Right, so 18 years ago.
Yeah, so a long time ago.
Yeah.
I was trying to figure out who I was to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
And so being around children actually at that age, there was no pressure.
Yeah.
You didn't have to mask. You could actually just be a fool, and they were good with it. They loved it. That was probably the biggest thing for it that got me in there to begin with. And then it was just loving the way that they think, just the conversations, everything that goes with it. Mm-hmm. But it started off with myself being able to feel okay with being a unique human.
And what was it like to be a male in the early childhood sector?
It sucked to begin with.
Yeah, tell us how and why that happened.
Yeah, so my first centre, I had a few families pull out immediately and say, we don't want the bond back, nothing like that. If you're hiring a male, we don't want them in there. Mm-hmm. Which at the time was a slap to the face, because I was like, well, I'd never faced any sort of prejudice over my gender before. So that was like whoa, hold up a second. And then over the years, it became easier. But I also became more confident with what I was doing. That was probably the biggest thing. But even in saying that, at the age of 28, 29, I think I was, I had a family that said, hey, we don't want you changing our child's nappy. I went, no drama. That's fine. Like, oh, no, don't have to do it. Like, it's fine. And that was all good. thought the conversation went well. The very next day, hey, we're going to pull them out. I went, okay, that's completely fine. That's your choice. That's your decision. I've been lucky enough to work with a couple of male educators, and then unfortunately, not many of them have stayed. I'm definitely a unicorn in that regards, where I've stayed quite a long time. Most men that I've worked with have only worked for 6 months up to maybe 2 years, and then they go do something different.
And how do you think that impacts children?
Children play differently with men. There's a different feel, a different sense of vulnerability. I've worked in a lot of centres where dads were not around for multiple reasons, and you could see the impact it had on the children when they actually had a male that was going to be there every single day to begin with, and also took a genuine interest in who they are, what they're about. So it has a massive impact. Like, it really, I don't think it's actually realized how much of an impact not having these positive males around for children is. Because it's a thing that men are going through a major shift at the moment of trying to figure out who they are and how they fit into this world. And children are feeling the impacts of that as well.
Absolutely. And so, as an early childhood teacher, you eventually got your Bachelor of Early Childhood and started leading the kindergarten rooms primarily.
Yep.
What are some of the things that you've seen in the sector that have made you proud of what we do here in Australia? And what are some of the things that it just doesn't make sense and you see it affect negatively those in the sector?
Probably the biggest thing in terms of negative impact is just the way that children are regarded. There is still, for a lot of educators, this belief that children are there to be seen and that's it. And that really impacts children and their understanding that their voice matters. It's probably the biggest one that I have seen.
Well, how do educators support children in that, or see children for that, when society doesn't see educators as valuable?
There's got to be someone who wants to make the change. And a lot of it coming from educators, it generally comes from the way they were brought up. Like, that's typically how that works. And so you reach a point, I know I personally did, I reached a point where I went, I'm tired every day. There's got to be an easier way. Like, these children are 3, these children are 4, like, they cannot be that hard. And I know that there has been talks about early childhood educators needing to have a bachelor to run a room, in terms of a nursery, in terms of a toddlers, all the way up. And I personally like the idea. I think in order for society to view early childhood education as a little bit more, there needs to be a greater barrier to get into the role as well. But
also, I have met and interviewed and seen and worked with people who have bachelors who, in my opinion, shouldn't be working with children.
Yeah, 100%.
And people who don't have a bachelor who have been working, 6 months a year, 10 years with children who are incredible educators.
I think it just comes down to there's that extra... It's a belief. It's that extra belief that someone that has put in the extra work to go and get a university degree, you're hoping, has a lot more interest in the role. But you're exactly right as well. I've worked with trainees. I've had 15-year-olds come out of school and go, this is what I really want to do. And then in a couple of years are some of the most amazing educators I've ever met. So I don't think that education is the be all and end all, but I do think in terms of society's views, it's moving it in a more positive direction.
Interesting, considering the quality of university degrees and the debts and all of that comes with it. A lot of educators that I've spoken to who go to do their bachelor are primarily doing it because of the extra pay that they would get by having it. So it's interesting topic that I think we can delve into deeper at a different time. And so,
just on that, I know that I personally gained more from my time in working than I did from my 4-year degree.
Yeah.
So 100%, I know the experience that I got has versed me a lot more than the actual theoretical knowledge of it all.
And so what are your beliefs around the different, I guess, we've got Certificate 3 in early childhood, we've got diploma, we've got bachelor. We've got obviously national regulations that require us to have a certain amount of percentage of different qualifications and things at different times and all of those sort of things.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it works, the current regulations? What would you change if you could change anything? And what is your opinion on all of those things?
As someone who ran a centre for 6 years, the biggest hurdle is the diploma 50% rule. And the rate in which you can RPL a diploma, I've seen firsthand people RPL an entire diploma in 3 months with 6 months experience, because it's easy to demonstrate the knowledge that you need to have once or twice, get it on camera, send it away, I'm done. So I think the biggest change is that 50% diploma rule. That makes it very difficult. And we've had multiple times where we've had to ask parents, please keep your children home. We actually can't have them here. And then it gets really awkward when you've got, let's say, 6 Cert 3 educators, but only 3 diploma. And so you're capped at a ratio of 6 educators in your entire centre when you actually have 9. That would be the biggest thing that I think needs to be looked at.
But on your point earlier about rooms having a bachelor qualified lead, if we can't even meet the diploma requirements now, that gap between that opinion of yours plus what's the reality of now is quite large. Yeah.
So I think having the bachelor trained educator is a very much in the future process. But exactly like I said, the current reality right now is we can't do that. And so one thing that I do fear is they are going to push it in early, same as they did for Queensland. You have to be fully qualified in order to do it. That impacted so many centres, so many educators. I've known educators that went, well, what's actually the point?
Absolutely.
And they swapped from early childhood to a teaching degree because they had just become jaded with early childhood and they left.
Yeah.
Good educators.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I guess let's talk into the early years learning framework and the different frameworks in which we have to meet in the sector. What are your thoughts about it? What works? What doesn't? How would you change it if you could change anything?
The biggest thing for me is the why behind what we're doing with children. And I've been guilty of it in the past. I'm doing this activity to tick this box to say that I've done a learning outcome 3 with a child this week.
Yeah. And
that goes against what holistic education is. And ultimately, the EYLF framework is holistic education. It is meant to hit all the different aspects of a child's development, but then the way that it's interpreted.
Is it interpreted, or if I may say, since we brought in assessment and rating?
Yes.
And it became box ticking for specifically to get a certain rating to look good externally to parents and so forth, is where I believe the box ticking came in. It's like, make sure I meet all of these requirements of the EYLF instead of seeing it for what it was meant to be, or what I assume it was meant to be interpreted as, it became a tool for assessment.
Yes, 100%. So that interpretation, I think it's less by the educators. I think it's by the educators believing what management believes that the assessment and rating people want in this whole process. There's all this, I think this is what they want, and mind reading without anyone actually really being able to say, this is the exact specific, because that's also the way the framework has been built.
Yeah.
To not have an exact specific, which...
But if you have an exact specific, and if you have an assessment tool like that it exists nationally here, then how can you make it streamlined if the people deciding who is exceeding, who's meeting, who's working towards, they're all different people doing different things. So their own interpretation of what they're seeing, their own projection perspective is different.
Yeah.
And so, for instance, using like somebody who might have, you know, been abused by a male growing up, they're the one who's assessing a centre that might have a male educator in the room. Their bias that maybe they're unconsciously could literally affect the entire rating of that centre, or that service.
Yes.
Compared to somebody who doesn't have that perspective output. Like, it causes so much stress in the sector. So many different narratives play out, and for what purpose?
I know personally when I was director of a centre, I tied my self-worth into an exceeding. If I didn't get exceeding, I'd failed.
Yeah.
That was the mentality. That's what I was going into. And then through further networking with other directors, I started to actually change that narrative for myself and realize that you can have an amazing centre, you can have an amazing community and not be exceeding. And that's okay. And so then in particular, in regards to EYLF and the programming, the observations and everything, we purposely stripped everything back to get good at the basics of connecting with children, allowing them to be seen, heard, valued, understood, and connecting with families, connecting with educators. We stripped everything back. We removed the notion of you need to do 3 observations a week. My litmus test for it, okay, can you tell me about this child? Talking to an educator, they will tell me a certain amount of things. If I look at the formal paperwork and it's pretty close to what they've written or what they've told me, fantastic, you've done enough. If what they've written is less than what they've told me, they should probably do a bit more formal documenting. If what they have told me is completely different or there's a lot more documentation, what you've written actually has no purpose. And so that is my general test to understand whether a child is 5 days, 3 days, 2 days, 1 day. It doesn't matter. If you can tell me where they're at developmentally wise and the paperwork reflects that, you're good.
Yeah. So as an approved provider myself, so as an owner of services over the years and as still of one now, the assessment and rating process was so interesting to experience, and we've gone through it multiple times at different centres that we've managed or owned. And the weight that it holds has become less and less over the years, because the thing is that ultimately, as an approved provider, one of the main problems is staffing.
Yes.
And so cool, I can worry about whether it's exceeding or meeting. And yes, we hope that centres are meeting the guidelines, the regulations. And it's important to pick up where the centres aren't doing that. However, to push to get exceeding because we're worried about what parents will say, the sector is at a point where it's like, can we open today?
Yeah.
Can we open and provide education and care for the children who are enrolled with us? Can we support our educators and their mental well-being, their physical well-being today? And it hasn't, I've had Montessori and been in this sector for just over 12 years. And to see, I didn't come from that background. I hadn't studied early childhood. I had become a parent.
Yeah.
And I wanted Montessori for my child. And that's how I got into this sector. And I believe that Montessori is extremely powerful and it's beautiful and it's a way of seeing the world and for children to be independent from as early as possible, blah, blah, blah. But when I look at the sector itself and its growth, I don't actually feel like it's shifted towards the positive much more than it was 12 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, I came into early childhood just before EYLF sort of came in, and it was so freeing. You legitimately turned up and children were saying, hey, I really want to do this today. Cool. All right, let's do it. It captured the magic of teaching.
So why did we put the EYL, like why does the framework exist? What problem did it solve? Because it was obviously created because there was negatives previous to that.
Yeah.
What has it allowed for?
I think it's allowed for a baseline.
Okay.
That's sort of, we're hitting this baseline, which has been converted into meeting.
Yeah.
The meeting of the A&R. We've hit there. So then that way, everyone who's underneath that, who's not achieving the required amount of whatever it is for them, they're able to have a benchmark to move towards.
Yeah.
I think the issue came when all of a sudden it became a competition to say, I'm one of only 6 exceeding centres in this city.
Yeah.
Where,
And that comes down to, I guess, corporations taking over and having brands or centres of early childhood on the stock market.
Yeah.
So having shareholders who care about profit.
Yeah, in the early days of my time in early childhood, we did a day book, and most of the day wasn't spent taking photos. We had to do them with a digital camera and upload them and print them out and do all the stuff. But most of the day was spent just being with the children. And that's where the pressure of the frameworks has come in and eliminated that for a lot of people, because now it's the stress of, I need to get X amount of things done, X amount of boxes ticked, so then that way we can hope that we're an exceeding centre.
So is it the stress of performing?
Yeah.
Ultimately. So the positive is that it gave us a baseline nationally.
Yes.
Of what is acceptable to meet the needs of children in our understanding at that time of their development. And then as technology has come into play, there are more and more parents where both parents are working. And so the guilt that they're feeling for going to work and leaving their child in care, all of these different scenarios are playing out. So then match that with technology, we're wanting to capture and over-document certain things of a child's development to meet the emotional needs of parents more than the actual needs of the child.
Yeah.
And then because of the rating, the way that the ratings went when they first came out, we swayed heavily that way. And then COVID happened.
Yes.
So as an owner, COVID occurring in this sector was one of the most traumatic things I've gone through.
Yeah.
I can remember sitting on my couch and, you know, that crying where there's no sound, but your entire body is screaming and tears are going everywhere because I had just heard on the news, you know, free childcare. And no explanation to explain to people what that actually fucking meant. Yep. And having to make sense of it. And I understood I could make sense of the fact that most of the government didn't know what to do in that scenario. No matter what your beliefs are, it's like nobody had a way to make sense of what to do.
Yes.
And I could understand how it was valuable for parents and how it was going to be helpful for them. But no one was talking about the impact it had on owners and what we had to do to support educators who were on the front line, undervalued most of the time until this moment. And that experience was like flipping that into a positive over time to be like, maybe this will change how people feel about early childhood and educators and teachers and they'll be valued differently. And it's just sort of feels like it's gone straight back to what that was like. But in that moment, you know, even through the JobKeeper and the working out who feels comfortable to stay with what and the own impacts it was having on the families of educators and teachers. It's different to teachers in primary school where school changed to, you know, teaching from home scenario our early childhood educators had to be on site
Yeah, it was
with children and families dropping off.
It was a usual day.
It was, except now we had this pretense feeling of like you're so needed and you're an essential worker.
Actually, it wasn't even a usual day because we then also had to emotionally be the support for every single family that had no idea what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
They already, a lot of them are experiencing a lot of emotions about dropping their children off in care. And then all of a sudden they go, I actually don't know what's happening. And the panic that happens there.
And the need for the educator to try to stay emotionally regulated themselves to support the parents and the child in that. And then when they go home, fear of themselves being sick or getting sick, and though having to let go.
Yeah.
And to feel themselves.
And still turn up the next day and support children because that's what we have to do.
And I haven't heard it spoken about at all around the fact that we're a number of years on now. And so the children who are in kindy years now, children who are around the age of 4, turning 4, or just started prep, they were children who were born in COVID.
Yes.
And the attachment styles that have created or the impact that that's had, you know, we're going to have data in a few years on it, but we don't have it now. But anecdotally, you can see the impact that experience has had. It's decimated the industry in regards to the amount of educators, how they feel.
Yeah.
We lost great educators due to
that
vaccination.
Plus what I mentioned earlier with the in Queensland for the teaching registration, like being a completed teaching degree. That plus COVID has.
And so now we add in the workers' retention grant payment that's being explored now, and the way that that's being delivered as a message to the public before the sector itself, and the impact that that's now having on employers, so approved providers, employees, how they feel about it, how does it work, when do I get paid, and then
90% of my social media on early childhood is, has your centre applied for the grant? Has your centre got the grant? We've been told we're not getting the grant. Whereas 12 months ago, probably, before this all sort of, a little bit before it sort of came out, the conversations were on there, how can I best support this child? I'm having troubles with this. Because
centres, as an owner, I was speaking to this, we were already fixing the problem or trying to fix the problem ourselves by paying above award rates, by managing where we could and managing the fees we were charging families to try to match the quality of what we were doing. Like, it was a juggling game, but we were doing it. And now this, what feels like to me, my own opinion, as an election promise, feels like COVID again. And secondly, it doesn't make any sense that we have to pay, we were already paying above award, so now we're expected to pay 10% above we were already paying, and not put our fees up more than 4.4%. Like, the mathematical calculations don't actually work. And so many different industry sector experts have been trying to work out how this calculation exists or what it is, and getting no answers from the department on it. And so we have a real big issue in front of us at the moment, and that is educators and teachers being paid what they're worth and keeping feasibility and viability within services, as well as ensuring that parents can afford care and education for their child. But after all of that doesn't actually fucking matter if we're not actually doing what the child needs from us. And we're not meeting their needs.
With all that, we still have to have the pressure of performing on top of it. And exactly like you said, how much of the children's needs are actually being met in all of this? Is it beneficial for a child's need for the parents to be stressing about paying fees, and then whatever arguments will occur as part of that? Mum, you should just not work anymore. There's no point in you working.
So then it affects the economy. Like when we have this conversation, it's not about this is the right solution, this is the wrong solution.
No, I don't know the right solution.
Absolutely. But it's about, at least to me, it is about opening up the conversation, because communication is the problem here. It was the problem in COVID, and it's the problem now with how it's being communicated and the lack of clarity and understanding of the intention behind the decisions that are being made.
Yeah.
And so as an approved provider, as an owner, I can communicate as clearly as I can to my team, to my educators, to my families. But then it changes from above, from the government, and that's not clear. And so then I need to try to interpret that to help that make sense. And that breaks down the trust or the understanding or what feels safe for those who I'm communicating to, because my word keeps changing.
Yes.
But my word keeps changing because it keeps changing up here. COVID was the same scenario. And so I understand that sometimes systems have to collapse. And I do feel that that's what's happening across the education sector in all years, in most countries, if not all. And I understand that that's likely what needs to happen so we can rebuild. And I think that this conversation is about, and what I Am Education is about, is having these conversations, is supporting educators, teachers, owners, and leaders in this sector to meet the needs and to remember why we do what we do for children.
It's for them to fall back in love with why you do it. Like that really, my journey from high school teaching, I was going to do sports science, and then teaching was going to be on the back foot in case the first thing didn't work. And then I fell in love with working with all these different age groups, and it changed the trajectory of what I was doing. And it was just that magic of teaching. And that's what we're losing.
And so, although we've spoken about the pros and the cons of the early childhood sector in Australia, our goal here is to open up the conversation and to allow the space for educators, teachers, and leaders to be heard, to ask the questions, for us to help them see things differently or different perspectives, how to not burn out, to have more regulated nervous systems.
Magic B word.
How to communicate. And so this is the start of that. So
definitely.
Thank you so much for being here and for tuning into our episode today on the sector in Australia when it comes to early childhood. We are here for you, and because of you, I am. And we would love your feedback, comments, questions below in the DMs. We're here to have the hard conversations.